Every year, Mr. Putin has this sort of mammoth telephone phone-in, which almost certainly is scripted. He hates doing things which aren't very clearly delineated. He doesn't like to go off-piste. But it is impressive nevertheless. So yesterday, Mr. Putin spoke out about the HMS Defender debacle, which was covered briefly in the British press. But what we haven't seen over here in the West is the enormous amount of coverage which is out there in Russia. Literally propaganda. And we have played directly into Mr. Putin's hands. This is such a silly adventure. Mr. Putin last night called this a provocation, quite obviously. And he suggested, in line with this propaganda widely touted around the Russian media, that the HMS Defender's route demonstrates that the West intends or intended to build military bases in the Ukraine, and indeed, moreover, and this is the really shocking bit, that the US intended to take over the port in the Crimea, which is used by the Russian submarine fleet, to take over that port as their own, and therefore this was the main reason why Russia was compelled to annex the Crimea. We have provided Mr. Putin with a global defence for his activity, but we've gone further than that, because we have given Mr. Putin the opportunity to demonstrate very clearly that this is not international waters any longer, even if the West simply doesn't recognise the annexation of the Crimea, and therefore that these waters are part of Russian territory. They have become de facto part of Russian territory because of the routes that we have taken around the Crimea, because of our testing of those waters, so to speak. And what makes it so much more worrying is we are saying, Boris said today in Parliament, that HMS Defender was conducting innocent passage through Ukrainian territorial waters in accordance with international law. But these territorial waters have become de facto Russian territorial waters. It's a very worrying scenario. And Mr. Putin was asked what would start World War III. Would this? And he laughingly said, well, no, we could just bomb HMS Defender or boats like that. And then we learn from this pile of papers dumped behind a park bench, or a bus shelter bench, that there really was a war games scenario. And many of these papers were pink, that is, papers which should not have left the Ministry of Defence. My goodness, our ministries, they're crumbling. The Health Service is a mess. The Ministry of Defence is a mess. What is going on? And we learn that the route taken by HMS Defender on the 23rd of June went 12 miles around the coast of the Crimea. We know that this was indeed provocative, that they were seeing how would Russia respond. And they had 3 scenarios for that response. We know that Russia fired on the boat, even if the UK Minister of Defence denied that happened and said, well, in fact, Russia was conducting its own war games elsewhere and we just heard the noise. No, there was a journalist on board who was anxious enough to tell us the story, and we could hear the firing of the guns in the background. We also know today from Wallace in the Ministry of Defence that the planes flew very close to the boat. Dangerous, he says. And now, yesterday, we learn that there was a Dutch ship called HMS Evertson that was dogged by Russian fighter planes on much the same route by Su-30s and Su-22s. And one wonders, was the Dutch boat also part of this war games scenario? What we have not seen much of in the UK in the last week or so is any reporting of the Russian response to HMS Defender. And therefore we don't realise what a propaganda victory that we have given to the Kremlin with this boy's own escapade. In the Russian news, this trip is seen as a provocation that was successfully resisted. Testimony, once again, to the power and might of Mr Putin's Russian war machine. Confirmation that the Crimea, annexed illegally and unrecognised by the majority of the international community, is now de facto Russian military space. We have provided Mr Putin with a propaganda victory of astonishing size for a domestic audience that is very soon going to be thinking about elections. To learn that this journey was a bear-baiting exercise by the Ministry of Defence is simply astonishing and, I think, deeply, deeply shocking. Unnecessary, certainly, and it has had the opposite effect to the one that the Ministry of Defence presumably intended. It was presumably intended that this would scare Russia. No, it hasn't. Not at all. It's impassioned Russia. It has not established that the area remains under Ukrainian control, or establish that this is an international naval route any longer. It's not. The BBC and our homegrown media can go so far as ignoring the front page banner headlines in Russian newspapers and the repeated sloganizing on Russian television stations. And Boris's denial today in Parliament, where he says that the HMS Defender was conducting, I'm going to quote this, was conducting innocent passage through Ukrainian territorial waters in accordance with international law. This is just words. This is just words, and we have cheapened our role in the world with this sort of escapade. We mustn't do it. It's simply not dealing with reality. They came into our waters and we responded. That's the scenario which is being presented to Russia. This is a political, I think this is a political disaster. And Mr Putin said yesterday, these people, us, the West, do not respect the Crimeans' choice to join the Russian Federation. We have provided the opportunity to for Mr Putin, for Russia, to defend the illegal annexation of the Crimea, and we look as if we are at fault. And I think, frankly, the Ministry of Defence, along with the Health Ministry, should be hanging its head in shame. The Secretary of State for that ministry should not simply be quarantining because of COVID. He should be handing in his resignation. But there we are. Please do follow me and do ring the bell. There's a little bell down there, I think, down there, somewhere down there. So ring the little bell if you get an opportunity. I don't really know where the little bell is. People do tell me, but there is a bell there. Please ring it. Please subscribe to my channel, and there'll be many more of these observations in the next few weeks. So for now, have fun. Bye-bye.